It's little wonder that games design is such an appealing career path these days. After all, it seems like you only have to put together a simplistic and addictive concept like Flappy Bird and then you're a millionaire almost overnight. But game developers haven't always had it so good. I mean, in the early years of the industry, much coding was done in dimly lit bedrooms by tech-savvy teens looking for an escape from the grim reality of a proper job. However, as the market for games started to grow and mature, then it all changed. The amazing amounts of money changing hands ensured that the profession acquired a rather more attractive lustre, and suddenly those same quiet coders were driving around in very expensive sports cars. And this image change was due in no small part to studios like the Bitmap brothers, arguably the first Western development house to acquire the kind of status usually reserved for rock stars. Founded in 1987 by Steve Kelly, Mike Montgomery and Eric Matthews, the Bitmap brothers were the original rockstar developers. A small but highly successful development team that prized quality over quantity and depth over glitz. Continually striving for originality, attention to detail and new levels of playability, the company has been responsible for several of the games industry's most memorable titles, released on a range of formats that have included 8, 16 and 30-bit home computers and consoles, from the earliest days of the Commodore 64 through today's high-performance PCs and consoles. I mean, I certainly remember seeing an enduring image of Mike Montgomery, Eric Matthews and Steve Kelly standing next to a privately owned helicopter in dark sunglasses, the epitome of fame and fortune. It seemed to sum up what the studio was all about and where the games industry as a whole was headed. However, as Montgomery reveals, the reality behind that stylish image is somewhat different. For starters, the helicopter wasn't theirs. It was owned by the late Robert Maxwell, the media tycoon behind Mirrorsoft, which published the games created by the Bitmaps under the label ImageWorks. I think the least we say about him the better, and his daughter, well, let's not even go there. Not a great story. Anyway, the company's focus was pretty much on the Atari, Amiga and MS-DOS platforms, but how I'll remember them is for the successful conversions to 8-bit and 16-bit they managed. Many of the studio's titles, including Xenon 2, the Chaos Engine and Speedball 2, have all gone on to be cult classics, regarded by many as some of the best games of the late 80s and early 90s. So, I wanted to do a video on the history of the Bitmap brothers and all their games. Great stuff, so let's get started. Now, Mike Montgomery, one of the co-founders of the Bitmap brothers, started off his life as a manager at Woolworths. And when the store started bringing in computers, well, Mike decided to buy some software and learn to code in his spare time. And he eventually became good enough to land a programming lead role, and eventually the Bitmap Brothers company was founded in 1987 by Mike as the managing director along with Steve Kelly and Eric Matthews, and the company was based in Wapping, East London and was privately owned. And eventually in 1998, Kelly and Matthews both stepped down from the board to concentrate on the games design and programming respectively, and Mike Montgomery took on the role of the managing director. Now, the Bitmaps knew they had talent, but they still needed to get themselves recognised in what was fast becoming a crowded marketplace. And it would be a late 80s UK children's television show by the name of Get Fresh, which would provide the new company with its big break. And the programme, well, it contained a segment where viewers would play a vertically scrolling shooter live on TV by shouting commands down the phone. And that game was Xenon, the first title to be produced by the fledgling Bitmaps. Callers could play the game remotely over the landline telephone, barking commands for some nimble-wristed ITV intern to follow. They would crash or get shot down or be awful in some other tedious fashion, and presenter Gaz Top would chuckle lightly, offer his condolences, and then turn back to whatever strange hand had his arm up the backside of a hideous green alien puppet called Gilbert. Oh, we laugh about its liquid shiteness now, but Get Fresh was everything the BBC rival show in the same weekend slot Going Live was not. It had the Centurions, which was awesome. It didn't have Peter Simon, and there was the small matter of it being somewhere where you could actually see video games on the TV, several years before the advent of Channel 4's Games Master. Anyway, what's this Xenon game all about? Let's have a look at that. So, Xenon is a vertically scrolling shooter, the first developed by the Bitmap brothers. It was originally written for the Atari ST and published by Melbourne House in 1988. Then it was ported to the Amiga, the Commodore 64, the MS-DOS, the MSX and the ZX Spectrum. And there was also an arcade machine version of the game which was released through Mastertronics Arcadia division, which ran on Amiga hardware. Now, in this game, the player assumes the role of a space pilot named Darian. One day, he receives a report from a nebula space station from which he learns that nearby human colonies have been attacked by mysterious aliens known as Xenites. Darian wastes no time and sets off to protect the humans and stop the aliens. Now, as I said, Xenon is an overhead shooter in which the player controls a vehicle that is able to transform into a tank or a plane. The transformation can usually be performed by the player at any time to combat particular enemies. However, during some sequences, the player is forced to use a specific type of vehicle. During the tank gameplay, the player controls the movement of the playfield up or down by simply moving the tank in the direction of choice. The game features a 3D playfield. Some enemies, for example, will be mounted on hills of sort where the tank can't shoot them. So, to combat these, the player needs to transform its tank into a plane. The game then switches to the more familiar gameplay style as seen in other vertically scrolling shooters. And the plane, well, it has to transform back into a tank again to combat most ground units. And also, upgrades can be taken from destroyed enemies, which does help the game. Now, Xenon, Bitmap's first game, was almost universally well received on launch, with reviewers from magazines covering a range of platforms all scoring the game very highly. For me, the game's a little bit dated, but this was a great first game for the Bitmaps. The Bitmap brothers would follow Xenon with Speedball, a game based on a violent, futuristic cyberpunk sport that draws on elements of handball and ice hockey and rewards violent play as well as goals. And the game, well, it was heavily influenced by the Hollywood movie Rollerball. And I have to say, as a kid, I did like that film. Now, Speedball was released in November 1988 by Imageworks for the Amiga and Atari ST. And as I said earlier, Imageworks was a British video game publisher that served as a publishing label for Mirrorsoft. The game was later ported to MS-DOS, Commodore 64 and the Sega Master System. And there was also a port release for the NES, which was known as Clash Ball. And the game we're looking at is the Amiga version. The game is played by two teams on an enclosed court with a goal at each end, similar to that of ice hockey or five-a-side football. The court contains fixed bounce domes that modify the trajectory and speed of a ball, as well as one hole in the middle at each side where upon entering the ball will appear at the opposite side, keeping its momentum. The layout of the domes in the court changes as the player faces a different team, up to a maximum of 10 variations. A player has control of only one outfield player on a team at any one time. The game may be played one or two players, and two-player games are played competitively. Two game modes are supported. There's Knockout, which face increasingly tougher teams controlled by the computer in the best of 3 matches, and then finally there's the League mode. The game starts with the player selecting a captain among 3 available choices, each starting with significantly more points than the other 2 in one of the 3 stats: stamina, power and skill. all the members in the team start the game with the same stats. During the actual game, as team members hit opponents, the opponent loses a part of his stamina, and when stamina drops low enough, that individual player will move slower than the rest of the players. The more powerful a team member is, the more damage he will deliver with a direct hit. Extra skill, on the other hand, promotes aggression from any team member controlled by the computer towards the opposite team and improves chances of a successful hit. And while in possession of the ball, well, the player can either press and immediately release the fire button to do a direct throw, or keep the button pressed to make the ball go higher. Players can then jump to try and catch it, but this makes them more vulnerable to being hit by the opposite team. As the game progresses, coins and several power-ups appear randomly, which can be collected. Power-ups include making the ball become electrified, and the opposite team can't pick it up, as they will take harm if they try to do that. And coins can be traded at the end of each game for different bonuses, such as extra time or several enhancements for all members in the player's team, including a permanent increase to any of their stats. Now, computer-controlled players, well, they can't collect coins, but the active player controlled by the computer can collect power-ups. And finally, the team that has amassed the most goals at the end of the game, well, they are the winner. Now, Speedball received scores of 862 for the MS-DOS and 834 for the Atari ST out of 1000 from Ace, and 79% from Mean Machines and 57% from PowerPlay. And also, well, the game won the 1989 Golden Joystick Game of the Year award. Computer Gaming World gave the game a positive review, praising its graphics and long-lasting gameplay. Xenon 2 Mega Blast is the third major video game released by the Bitmap brothers, which was released in 1989 and published by ImageWorks for the Amiga and the Atari ST. And it was later converted to the Master System, the PC-98, the X68000, the Mega Drive, the Commodore CD-TV, Game Boy, Acorn Archimedes and the Atari Jaguar platforms. Its subtitle is derived from the Bomb the Bass track Mega Blast, which serves as the game's theme music. And this sequel to Xenon takes place a millennium after the previous title. And the goal of the game, well, is to destroy a series of bombs planted throughout history by the Xenites, the vengeful antagonists of the first game. The player controls the Mega Blaster, a small battlecraft that can move in multiple directions, and it's equipped with a blaster as an offensive measure and is shielded from enemy attacks and collisions for a temporary period. The game is split into 5 scrolling levels, ranging in theme from the Cambrian era to futuristic metallic spaceways. The levels are primarily inhabited by aggressive lifeforms that have been mutated by radiation emanating from the bombs planted at the end of each level. Attacks from these enemy characters will decrease the player's shield. And if the shield is completely depleted, well, the ship will be destroyed by the next hit it sustains. And the player will lose a life. Each level contains 6 restart positions from which the ship will respawn at the most recent position passed if a life is lost. And if all 3 lives are lost, then the game will end. The shield can also sustain damage if the ship is trapped by the scenery and is crushed as the screen continues to scroll. The player can reverse the direction of scrolling to a limited extent by pulling back on the directional input when the ship is at the bottom of the screen. And there's a boss character found at the end of each level, and this requires a specific strategy to destroy them. And when the nasty boss is defeated, well, the bomb within the level will be defused. Now, the first level only features one boss character, while the other 4 feature another boss at the level's halfway point. Capsules can occasionally be found within the levels and release one of a variety of collectible tokens when destroyed. And these tokens can be augmented to the ship's weaponry or speed, restore a portion of the ship's shield, or allow the ship to dive into the background for a limited time. And also, the destroyed enemies leave behind currency known as real cash, the quantity and value of which depending on the size of the enemy. Real cash can also be used to buy and sell tokens at Crispin's Swap Shop, which the player can access twice per level. Now, Mega Blast is primarily a single player game, but it does allow for 2 players to play intermittently. And finally, the release of Xenon 2 Mega Blast was met with critical acclaim and commercial success, with reviewers praising the detailed visuals, addictive gameplay, variety of weapons and innovative soundtrack. And I quite agree with that too. The next Bitmap game was Cadaver, which is a 3D isometric action adventure released by ImageWorks in August 1990 for the Atari ST, Amiga and MS-DOS. Apparently there was a Mega Drive version planned, but this was never released. The game is played using a joystick and keys. In the person of the thief Caradoc, the player sets out to raid the 5 stories of the Castle Wolf. And legend has it that it's filled with treasure, so that's nice. But what the legend didn't say is that the castle is also filled with deadly traps, riddles, and not to forget the monsters. Surviving is not only a question of defending yourself. Caradoc needs to explore the murky dungeons and eerie corridors to prove his wit in collecting and interacting with objects, put them to the right use, mastering spells, and solving tasks posed by the gods. And quick reflexes and jumping skill wouldn't hurt either. And the ultimate objective is to kill the necromancer Dionys. He's not a very nice guy. Now, Caradoc's basic skills include the ability to walk, jump, climb stairs and fight monsters. There are 3 major modes of controlling the dwarf and his actions: basic movement, interacting with objects via icons, and the rucksack. Now, I have to say, I quite liked this game. It reminded me, I suppose, of Landstalker that I played on the Mega Drive, and I quite enjoyed that game too. The game was received well at its release too. The Atari version was awarded a hit in the Computer and Video Games magazine issue 107 in 1990. And in the same year, the Amiga version received a CU Screen Star from CU Amiga magazine and was an Amiga Joker hit in the Amiga Joker magazine, amongst others. So, overall, quite a good game. In 1990 would bring what many regard as the best Bitmap Brothers title, Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe. And again, like its predecessor, it was heavily influenced by the Hollywood movie Rollerball and featured a futuristic sport that played like a cross between American football and soccer. The game was initially released for the Amiga and the Atari ST in 1990, and then it was released from multiple platforms: the Acorn, Archimedes, the Atari Jaguar, the Atari ST, the Amiga CD32, IBM PC compatibles, Commodore 64, Mega Drive, Master System, Game Boy, and lastly the Game Boy Advance. According to the game's story, the first Speedball League, founded in 2095, fails due to violence and corruption. As the organisation gives rise to anarchy, the game is forced underground. But 5 years later, in an attempt to regain public interest, Speedball 2 is born. The game starts in 2105 with the emergence of a new team, Brutal Deluxe. Now, Speedball 2 makes several changes over the original Speedball. Each team has 9 players on court rather than the 5, and targets on the floor and walls can be hit for bonus points. The number of points that a team receives for scoring a goal is normally 10, but this can be increased to 15 or 20 via the use of score multiplier ramps located on the walls of the pitch. The same number of points for scoring a goal is given for injuring a player from the opposing team. When a player is injured, he is replaced by one of the 3 substitutes. And if all 3 substitutes are injured, well, the injured player will be forced to return to the game and play on in spite of his injuries. The game has 5 game modes: Knockout, Cup, League, Practice and Multiplayer. And each game lasts for 180 seconds, divided into 2 halves. So there you go, that's the game. Now, the game was a commercial and critical smash hit. Speedball 2 is one of Bitmap Brothers' most successful titles. Zap, CU Amiga and computer and video games scored the game highly. And the music, written by Simon Rogers and remixed and coded by Richard Joseph, won the 1991 Golden Joystick Award for Best Soundtrack. And the game was voted the 3rd best game of all time in the Amiga Power. Wow. And also in 1994, the PC Gamer US named Speedball 2 the 24th best computer game ever. And finally, Speedball 2 has sold over 2 million copies. Wow. Now, it was around about this same time that Montgomery, Matthews and Kelly had become very dissatisfied with the practices of publishing companies. And as you can recall, the previous games were published by Mirrorsoft. Therefore, they decided that it was time to take publishing into their own hands, and as a result, they founded Renegade Software to handle the distribution of their own titles as well as those of other developers. And this approach came about due to the establishment of another famous Bitmap Brothers trademark, the use of professional artists when it came to in-game music. Their stated goal was to give game developers more artistic freedom and more recognition. One of their first games released by Renegade Software was Magic Pockets, which we will look at, for which they struck a deal with music publisher Rhythm King to include a Betty Boo song in the game. And Renegade, well, they would go on to publish games created by legendary British studio Sensible Software, such as Sensible Soccer and Sensible World of Soccer, as well as other seminal 16-bit titles such as Turrican 3, Flight of the Amazon Queen and Elfmania. I have to say, I'm a big fan of Sensible Soccer. It was a simple game, but it was so flippin' addictive. And of course, Renegade Software would also release subsequent Bitmap Brothers classics, such as including Gods and the Chaos Engine, and we'll look at all of those games in a second. Now, Cadaver also had an expansion pack titled Cadaver The Payoff, which was released in 1991, and it's the first game under the Renegade label. After defeating Dionys, Karadik returns to the inn only to find his employers gone, and every living person within the city is either dead or transformed into a monster. Seeking the cause behind this, the dwarf fights his way to the local temple. There he finds the answers, and he also finds his money deep in the crypts. Now the gameplay is similar to the original game. Cadaver The Payoff has only 4 levels, but they are significantly more complex and taxing than those of the first game, and the second level has a large number of monsters and scant possibilities to heal. Anyway, let's have a little look at the game.
Into the wonderful, into the wonderful, into the wonderful, into the wonderful.
Okay, now we're on to Gods, which was released in 1991 for the Amiga and the Atari ST. In this game, you're cast as Hercules in his quest to achieve immortality. And the game was also ported to the Acorn Archimedes, the Genesis Mega Drive, the PC-98, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and the Atari Jaguar. A Game Boy Advance version was also in development, but that was cancelled. There was also a TurboGrafx CD version of the works, but apparently was cancelled for unknown reasons. Now, 4 Guardians have invaded and taken over the Citadel of the Gods. The gods offer any hero who can succeed in retaking the Citadel one favour. The hero who comes forth asks the gods as their favour to be granted a seat among them as an equal. And those gods, well, they're only comforted by the hope that the hero will fail. And after the last boss is beaten, well, the gods prove true to their word. And the last image is the hero becoming a being of light as he ascends to Mount Olympus. Now, it's fair to say that precise and time jumping are required to progress in this game. Planning each move carefully yields better results health-wise than attempting to rush through a level, and there are some puzzles which require the player to go back and forth in the level, since there is only a 4-space inventory where objects required to get bonuses or to complete a level can be carried. The console versions of the game, particularly the Mega Drive and the Genesis version, run at a considerably higher speed, which increases the difficulty level. And the console versions, well, they do not share the same opening theme music as the PC versions of the game. There are several weapons available in the levels, or to buy, and up to 3 of each can be used simultaneously. It is also possible to vary the focus of the weapons. To destroy more enemies at the same horizontal level as the player, a tight angle is advisable. But in levels with open spaces and enemies in higher places, a diffuse aim might prove more useful. There are also other weapons, such as bouncing axes, that can be used to take on enemies at a lower level. Or if you want, you can use fireballs. And you need to be careful because the enemy AI adapts to the player position and their skill. And some rooms, well, they contain inaccessible items. Smaller thieves show up from a passage in the wall, try to grab the item and bring it back to another point in the room or disappear with it. But the player is able to obtain this item if they shoot the thief at the correct time. Also, bonuses are awarded for reaching certain parts of the level under a certain limit of time or a number of lives, bringing an object to a room or simply by playing poorly, where the game helps the player. There are 4 levels, each with a guardian at the end. After completion of a level, the player meets a trader, and depending on the wealth accumulated during the game by catching diamond-shaped jewels or bags, can buy more powerful weapons or items. Quite similar to Zen 2 Mega Blast, it uses the same idea. Now, Computer Gaming World in 1992 named it one of the year's top 4 action games for fast and furious arcade-style action, enough exploration and puzzle solving to raise it above the typical action crowd. For me, I owned this game on my Mega Drive. I thought it was an okay game, but I have to say I didn't play it to the end because I got a little bit bored with it, but that's just me speaking here. Okay, next up is Magic Pockets, which is a platform game published by Renegade in October 1991. It was released for the Atari ST, the Amiga, Acorn Archimedes and MS-DOS. The game is described as their first attempt at a cutesy platform game, inspirations coming from Super Mario Bros., Rainbow Islands and Flood. And with Renegade Software being part of music company Rhythm King, a remix version of Doing the Do by Betty Boo, originally released in 1990 on the Rhythm King label, was used for the game's opening. And the game was also played in between cartoons on the Saturday morning television series Motormouth. Viewers would call in and play the game through commands they would give. Again, very positive publicity for the company, and very similar what they were doing with Xenon 1 with that Saturday show Get Fresh. Anyway, let's talk about the game. A boy known as the Bitmap Kid has a pair of magic trousers that contain pockets with an infinite amount of storage space, and therefore he stores all of his toys in his pockets. One day, the creatures who live in his pockets decide to keep his toys for themselves and play with them, so the Bitmap Kid must go on a journey to retrieve his toys from the creatures. As you can see, the game is a platform game allowing walking, jumping and hurling items to defeat foes. There are 4 areas in the game: cave, jungle, river and mountain areas, each of which is split into several stages, including a bonus stage where the Bitmap Kid must outdo the creatures depending on what toy is to be retrieved. For example, the bike is found in the cave area, and so the bonus stage is a bike race against the creatures. Now, the Bitmap Kid has a different attack for every area of the game, all of which may be charged up by holding down the fire button to throw a bigger projectile. The largest projectile has the ability to suck up enemies rather than destroying them. They will then be converted into pickups. These pickups range from sweets, which add points, to silver and gold stars, which introduce another aspect of gameplay: helmets. By collecting silver stars, the Bitmap Kid can then collect a gold star, which will produce a helmet he can wear for a limited time. And these helmets, well, they vary from teleporters to laser beams to invincibility. He may also float by using chewing gum collected from gum dispensers in the levels to inflate a large bubble. And these bubbles, well, they can sometimes help to reach the secret areas. Now, there is no timer in the game. After taking too long, a transparent bubble chases the Bitmap Kid, gradually growing faster and faster over time. And flipping heck, if they come in contact, the bubble will trap the kid and he will lose all his power-ups except at the last stage, where the bubble will kill him. And finally, well, Magic Pockets received generally positive reviews from the video game critics. Let's have a look at the game. Okay, next up is the Chaos Engine. So, the Chaos Engine is a top-down run and gun video game developed by the Bitmap brothers and published by Renegade Software in March 1993. The game is set in a steampunk Victorian age, in which 1 or 2 players must battle the hostile creations of the eponymous Chaos Engine across 4 landscapes and ultimately defeat it and its deranged inventor. It was first released for the Amiga and then later ported to the MS-DOS, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Atari ST, Amiga 32, the RISC OS and Mega Drive. In the Super NES and Mega Drive versions, the preacher character was renamed as the Scientist and redesigned to remove his clerical collar. And also, the US versions of these 2 ports were retitled Soldiers of Fortune. And as I said, the setting is a steampunk Victorian era in England. A time traveller on a mission from the distant future became stranded in the England of the late 1800s, and this technology came into the hands of the Royal Society, led by Baron Fortesque, a grand inventor. And this Baron, the grand inventor, well, he retro-engineered many of the futuristic contraptions, creating an entirely different alternative timeline. Baron Fortesque then succeeded in his greatest creation yet, the Chaos Engine, which was able to experiment with matter and the very nature of space and time. Unfortunately, for the rest of the Proud Kingdom, the engine then proceeded to become sentient, captured and assimilated its creator, and began to change the countryside for the worse. Vile monsters and destructive automata appeared everywhere, and even prehistoric beasts were resurrected. Telegram wires connecting the British Isles to the European mainland are cut, and any ship attempting to enter a British port is attacked. The British royal family, members of parliament and a large number of refugees managed to escape across the sea, bringing with them many tales of horror. The British Empire is left in tatters and the world in economic and political chaos. Sounds a bit like today, if I'll be honest with you. And all of this lures a number of mercenaries on a potentially rewarding quest to infiltrate the quarantined Britain, find the root of the problem and swiftly bring a full stop to it. At the end of the cellars in the Hall of Machines, the player characters face the Chaos Engine itself in a last battle. And upon its destruction, the narrator of the game is revealed to be the Baron himself, trapped within the machine and studded with implants. Now, this introductory sequence is displayed in text on the screen on the floppy disk Amiga versions, but a slightly modified version is narrated with a voiceover on the Amiga CD32 version, together with some scene-setting animations. Now, in the game, you choose 2 adventurers from a group of 6 to take on the task of defeating the Mad Baron Fortisk and the Chaos Engine itself. The playable characters have various qualities that affect gameplay, such as speed and combat ability. The players are provided with a certain amount of money to start the game and must hire the chosen characters at their set prices. In the one-player mode, the computer artificial intelligence controls the second player so that one never has to fight the chaos alone. And it is important to say that control of characters cannot be swapped once they've been chosen. Now, sure, it is possible to play with only one character by starting a 2-player game and letting the enemies kill the second character, but that's a bit pointless, isn't it? Now, the players must travel through 4 worlds consisting of 4 levels each, picking up power-ups, gold and keys to pass through the various puzzles and mazes. A number of nodes must be activated via weapon fire or special power to open the final doors at the end of each level. And at the end of every second level, the players has a chance to spend their collector's riches to upgrade their weapons, increase the number of hit points of their character, purchase new items and improve other character attributes. Now, Electronic Gaming Monthly gave the Super NES version a 6.8 out of 10, summarising it as a decent overhead shooting game in the spirit of Techno Clash and Gauntlet. And they also gave the Genesis version a 6.4 out of 10. GamePro remarked of the Genesis version that overhead view gunfighting has never played better, citing the heavy challenge, solid controls and use of teamwork. They did criticise the sprites as overly small, but also noted that the sharp artwork ensures that it is still easy to make out what is happening on the screen. Reviewing the computer version, Computer Game wrote, "For the price, this is a must-buy if you like 2-player arcade shooters, especially since another one for the PC may not come along for a while." And in 1995, Total ranked the Chaos Engine 68th of their top 100 SNES games, summarising sort of Jules Verne meets Arnie. This is a great cooperative challenge and very stylish with it. So a little bit of a mixed bag there. The reviews range from just above average to pretty good. For me, it's a pretty good game. One of the better Bitmap games, I have to say. I quite enjoyed it. Now, the foundation of Renegade by the Bitmap brothers was a timely matter, I have to say. Their timing was just great because by the middle of the 90s, the games industry was starting to explode and many media giants were opening their wallets looking to make their own routes into this potentially lucrative business. And Renegade, with its inviolable track record and stable of hits, was just ripe for acquisition. And guess what? Well, Warner Interactive Entertainment, operated by multinational media giant Time Warner, was the company which came knocking at the door in 1995. But it was business as usual because the Bitmap brothers they continue to produce and develop brilliant games. Well, the next game's okay, I suppose. It's not brilliant, but it's okay, and that is Chaos Engine 2. And as you can guess, the Chaos Engine 2 is a top-down shooter video game, and it's the sequel to the Chaos Engine, released for the Amiga in 1996. And apparently there was a Sega Mega Drive version which was planned but was never released. During the original game, the protagonist succeeded in destroying the Chaos Engine, a time travel device. Its creator, Baron Fortesque, appears to have been defeated. However, in the Chaos Engine 2, it transpires that he and the protagonist are all trapped within a temporal singularity created by the destruction of the Chaos Engine device. So, in order to survive, they must assist the Baron in rebuilding the device, though only one of them will be able to escape the singularity. Unlike its predecessor, the Chaos Engine 2 is a split-screen deathmatch between two players, one of which may be controlled by the computer, because bizarrely there is no cooperative mode available in this game. Instead, each player must try to obtain the greatest score, either by simply killing the opponent repeatedly or by collecting objects, destroying monsters, fulfilling tasks and solving puzzles. Conversely, points are also lost if killed. Inventories are dropped upon death, which means that if a quest requires a key to unlock a door or safe, it becomes necessary to kill the opponent should they acquire it before the player. If a human opponent has the highest score at the end of the round, they move on to the next, and if the computer defeats the player, the round is replayed until the user wins. A game can be played across 4, 8, 12 or 16 rounds, with each consistent of a different environment: medieval, Aztec and chaos. Now for me, I would say I was a bigger fan of the first game, Chaos Engine, as opposed to the sequel. But in saying all that, I have to say Chaos Engine 2 was met with highly positive reviews. So, what do I know? Amiga Computing commented that the graphics are smooth and flowing, the action non-stop, and there is a huge amount of playability. In a similar vein, CU Amiga praised it as a totally brilliant single or multiplayer game. And finally, Amiga Format, well, they criticised the difficulty of the single player deathmatch against a computer, with the reviewer remarking that while it provided players with plenty of challenge, the computers seemed to have way too much of an unfair advantage. So there you go, that was Chaos Engine 2. Alright, now it's going to get interesting because now we're on to Zed. Zed is a real-time strategy video game by the Bitmap brothers, and it was initially published for the MS-DOS in 1996 by Renegade Software, and then it was ported to the Mac, PlayStation and Saturn. In Zed, two armies of robots, red and blue, battle to conquer different planets. Unlike traditional real-time strategy games, there is no resource collection, map exploration or base building. Regions and structures within their borders that actually manufacture the units are captured by moving troops to their respective flags. All that is needed to do is to hold acquire position for a certain amount of time while the unit is manufacturing. The more regions are under the player's control, the less the time required. And more powerful units, well, they take more time to construct. The objective of the game is to eliminate the opponent by taking out their command fort, either by sending a unit to enter or by destroying it directly. And alternatively, destroying all the opponent's units immediately wins the game. At the start of every mission, each side is given control of their fort and a small group of units. A host of unmanned turrets and vehicles are usually scattered about the map, and sending a robot to these will allow the player to add them to their army. However, the assigned robot will remain in the captured vehicle or turret as a pilot or a gunner, although he may be removed from the gun, effectively splitting him from his squad. The game is significantly different from others of its type. For example, vehicle drivers can take damage from enemy fire, and if the driver is destroyed, the vehicle they are commanding will be unmanned and can be captured by either side. Also, different robot types behave differently. For example, the more intelligent units such as snipers are less likely to pop up from a tank and expose themselves to fire. Now the game starts off with simple, symmetric levels where the CPU starts with roughly the same hardware as the player. As the game progresses, the levels become more complex, demanding more skill to control all units effectively, and the computer gains an advantage in starting units. For example, the CPU's fort usually has substantially more powerful guard turrets. The computer also gains more logistic advantages. Now, combat takes place on several planets with 4 missions on each. When one is successfully captured, a spaceship transports a robot army to another. Now, I have to say, I was a big fan of Command & Conquer, so when I played this game, I was quite surprised how good it was. Maybe not quite at the level of Command & Conquer, but it was still a very good game. And this is what the magazines thought of the game. Reviewing the PC version, Chris Huddock of GameSpot called Zed the alcoholic, head-banging, gap-toothed, punch-drunk, inbred cousin of Command & Conquer. He particularly praised the game's accessibility, the network multiplayer and the ability to blast through obstructive terrain, although he found some issues with the AI. A Next Generation critic commented that the Z stands out from the other real-time strategy games because of the absence of resource management, which puts the focus on the game on fast reaction time and raw strategy rather than economics. He also said that Z lacks the longevity of its nearest competition since it has relatively few missions and the two sides use the same units, but it is a very good original game that's enjoyable on its own right, with its AI interface and multiplayer mode all being strong assets. PC Zone magazine describes Z as a brilliant strategy game that is so hard you can't help but get value for money. Like all Bitmap Brother games, there are loads of little touches that will amuse you, from the incompetent pisshead droids in the cutscenes, flying you from level to level and crashing on the people flagging them in, to the voice which says when you're struggling, you are so crap. Computer Gaming World gave it 3.5 out of 5 and called it an excellent, quick and dirty version of Command & Conquer, stripped down for speed and playability. They said that if you don't mind a game that's on the short side and you are a real-time tactical game lover with a good sense of humour, then buckle into your computer chair, dude, and crack open a cold can of rocket fuel, because Z is going to be your favourite letter. Reviewing the Saturn port, Sega Saturn magazine Lee Nutter gave the AI for both friendly and enemy troops the highest of praise, and also commented on the addictiveness of the gameplay and the effectiveness of the point-and-click controls. However, he rated it the weakest of the 3 war simulators available for the Saturn in Europe, citing its short length, lack of multiplayer and comparatively shallow gameplay. So there you go, that was the reviews of Z, and I'd probably say it's probably a stripped down version of Command & Conquer, and I have to say I did love Command & Conquer. It was one of my favourite real-time strategy games.
You got it. Unit report. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They're all over us! Unit report, no problem. Territory lost. Unit reporting. Going in.
Now, Z doesn't stop there, because apparently there was Z the expansion kit. There were 2 main versions for the PC use, one for the DOS named Z, and another for Windows 95 named Z95 and Expansion. There are very few differences between the Z-DOS version and the Z95 version. Most of all, Z95 was made much more compatible with Windows 95, which was becoming more and more popular at that particular time. Also, some more levels were added to the so-called expansion kit. The Z-DOS version has an interface for loading the game as its first step. In Z95, the interface is still there, but modified, and is just a normal interface using APIs of Windows 95 without the eye candy buttons. The Z-DOS version is much slower, which affects the gameplay, whereas the Z95 version improves the speed and lets the game feel like a real-time strategy field. Also, a few unit statistics were changed to improve the game's balance. Okay, next up is Speedball 2100. Speedball 2100 was released only for the PlayStation, and it's a 3D version of Speedball 2 with more options such as choosing and renaming any team, instead of having to play with Brutal Deluxe. Now, this version, which was released in September 2000, I have to say it failed to win over gamers and press because it lacked the speed and gameplay of the originals. And Speedball 2100 was also released on Evercade as part of the Bitmap Brothers Collection 1, and we'll have a little look at that when we get to it. But anyway, let's have a look at the game. Right, yo, here's another remake, this time it's Xenon 2000 Project PCF, which is a remake of Xenon 2 Mega Blast. In this top-down arcade shooter, blast away meteors and your enemies while collecting power-ups for weapons, upgrades and so on. Eliminate the end-level bosses to clear each level, and that's the end of the game. Okay, it's a bit more than that, but listen, this remake features higher resolution graphics and a different soundtrack. It's an okay game, let's have a look.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so here we are. We're now on to Z Steel Soldiers, which again is a real-time strategy game released by the Bitmap Brothers in 2001 for the Windows platform and later by Capcom Limited and KISS for their mobile phones in 2015. It's obviously the sequel of the earlier game Z and follows the same futuristic military science fiction storyline and battlefield gameplay. But this time, the graphics are enhanced from 2D to 3D. As a result of a breach in peace negotiations, players take control of one side as a leader of an army of robots. Playing the game primarily involves fending off robust opponents during battles to control a location, whilst expanding one's forces. And objectives are met by occupying and holding territory rather than the typical method of harvesting resources, just like the first game. But I have to say, despite featuring solid fundamentals and gaining mixed or average reviews, the game had minimal impact. While only receiving one Gaming Magazine award and gathering some criticism upon its release, the title was still an important technological advance for the development team. Now, Steel Soldiers is plot-driven, unlike the original game which had little or no plot and consisted of two sides fighting each other for no given reason, while game cutscenes were focused on comical, humorous situations. After 509 years of conflict, Megacom Corporation, the Red Team, and Trans Global Empires, the Blue Team, are set to make peace and sign a treaty. In preparation, forces on both sides have reduced their military presence to a skeleton regiment. The accumulation of the peace treaty is the removal of both forces from the contested territory on planet Rigel. Now, the plot of the game was written by Martin Pond, and as the game is played, it progresses with elements of intrigue and conspiracy. The peace initiative is brokered personally by Commander Keeler and Trans Global's Premier Commander Riemann. After a court-martial judgment, the recently demoted Captain Zod, previously Commander Zod in the original Z, has been sending patrols into the demilitarized zone to spy upon the Trans Global Empires. The scouts Brad and Clark find a secret landing strip and promptly shoot down a transport ship after this discovery. The game begins with Zod sending in forces on a mission to retrieve the two missing scouts and find out what the hell is going on. During which they find a broken box with the word Omega on it. Brad and Clark's radio remains silent, and although Zod lacks the proper authority, he is confident the peace agreement will remain intact, but his aide Lasser is more concerned. So there you go, that's the plot of the game.
Reporting for duty, sir. Here we
The developers wanted an accessible strategy game combined with the immediacy of an arcade title. Consequently, the game was designed so a player could get into the action as quickly as possible. And Zed Steel Soldiers sports a humorous comic book style with a realistic 3D environment. The game features the ability to scroll, rotate, zoom and tilt the isometric viewing position to gain a better perspective. Now, there certainly is a high level of graphical detail such as reflections, shadows, weather effects and other environmental factors that can certainly slow the frame rate down on low-end PCs. So, you need to have a good PC. The game also has an advanced artificial intelligence that makes holding defensive positions central to completing each mission. There are 30 missions on 6 different worlds including desert, forest, volcanic, ice and wasteland types. Each type of the world has varying wildlife and lighting effects. This sequel also adds aircraft and water vessels to the units available. With the completion of missions comes the introduction of new buildings and armoured units including rocket launchers, bombers, helicopters and tanks. Also, when the game is paused, players can scroll across the playing area, but places not under their control will not display enemy buildings and unit commands may not be issued. The game also offers 3 difficulty levels, easy, medium and hard. Steel Soldiers doesn't have any tutorial, however the CD-ROM contains a 59-page game manual, so that'll come in handy. And I have to say the background music was designed to heighten the game's intensity. The game also has a high score table and the ability to load and save games. There's also a skirmish mode, which is a customisable secondary playing mode based on a series of separate maps to the missions. And of course there's multiplayer games which also occur on another 20 additional maps, and that's good too. And if you haven't guessed, well, the players control a group of robotic soldiers and vehicles in a 2-sided war. At the start of each mission, the current scenario and objectives are outlined. The level objectives also vary considerably compared to the original game, from capture aircraft hangars and shipyards to reach the evac point within a time limit. Some of the operations are timed with a countdown, and other mission duties are securing a landing area to capture research facilities and evacuate personnel. The command centre is the headquarters and functions as a communications hub. And you need to be careful because if this building is destroyed then the mission ends in failure. The gameplay is based around fast-paced action battle without resource gathering. Winning the game requires speed and sound blitzkrieg tactics. The main aim is to gain territory by securing a sector after touching a flag. Each mission begins with an introduction that includes a discussion of the goals and a preview across a sweeping landscape, briefly revealing geographical features and approaches to some strategically important flag locations. And the more territory a player gains, the greater the number of units that may be built and provides more land for the construction of buildings. Unoccupied buildings that are neutral are owned with control of the sector. Also, each flag has a number between 1 and 5 depicted upon it, and this number represents a multiplier for the amount of credits a player will draw from the territory each minute when captured. And the credits are used at factory buildings and research facilities to construct robots. Other activities include cancelling orders, building bunkers and gun turrets, issuing repair tasks and selling buildings for credits. Players have the ability to queue commands and set waypoints so that the newly created units can automatically move to a location once built. Each unit and structure in Zed Steel Soldiers has a damage indicator also. Coloured radius rings mark line of sight limits and weapon range boundaries for the currently selected unit. Collapsed status panels include the message and information panel from a leader cam, which is an overhead view, a unit info view panel, a mini-map panel displaying which territories are held by transglobal empires, Megacom Corporation, or which are neutral. These panels are used to coordinate army unit movements, view mission goals and troop statistics. Wow, so there you go, plenty to get your head round with this game, but it's all fun. If you like real strategy games, this is a good game to play. Now, after it was released, the game did receive average reviews according to the review aggregation website Metacritic. The majority did describe the game as a fun strategy game with great graphics. A PC Zone review awarded a classic award to Steel Soldiers and concluded that the game's strong points were the sharp artificial intelligence, good use of ambient sounds and well-designed maps. However, there was also a smaller number of reviews that were less flattering, describing the experience as standard, as one that would bore a veteran real-time strategy gamer. Z Steel Soldiers is similar to other PC strategy games with a military science fiction theme including ground control, StarCraft and Warzone 2100. Several reviewers commented that Steel Soldiers offers nothing new to the genre. That's a little bit hard. It's not a bad game, although I did like Warzone 2100. I did play that game a lot on my PlayStation. Now, Z Steel Soldiers did have a weak impact compared to the more popular Warcraft 2 and Command & Conquer. A few reviewers noted tiny annoyances, that the game was predictable while others described the game imperfections as significant. The game has been criticised over its lack of diversity, clumsy interface and generic sounds. One review described the game as old school, formulaic and lacking distinctive graphics. In the humour, well, it's been criticised as both caustic and witty. And at least one reviewer suggested that game speed toggle, which would have been a useful addition for players. So, there you go, a little bit mixed. They're saying it's not really setting anything on fire compared to Command & Conquer and such. But for me, if you like real strategy games, this is a good game to play. You got to ignore Command & Conquer and you got to give this game a go, because it's a good game in my opinion.
Gun manufactured. Territory gained.
Okay, and here we are, 2003 World War II Frontline Command. World War II Frontline Command is a real-time strategy 3D tactical wargame for Windows. It was originally released in Europe during May 2003 by Koch Media and a month later in June by Strategy First. But of course it was developed by the Bitmap brothers. The game is set within an era of World War II. The game opens with the player dropping paratroopers into Europe to disrupt the entrenched Axis forces ahead of the main invasion forces set to land on D-Day. And gaming director Jimmy Barber, well, he noted that the game engine used in the creation of Z Steel Soldiers was basically upgraded in the development of Frontline Command. And in this game, the players must take command of their forces and turn the tide of Axis aggression while conquering Fortress Europe. And this will be done using a vast amount of authentic infantry, vehicles and weaponry. Mission objectives include destroying bridges, clearing bunkers and knocking down radar towers. There are no resources to be collected or buildings to be constructed. World War II Frontline Command features two play modes, Recruit and Veteran. And both these modes share some of the same mission maps. Now, enemy units are attracted to noise, so using gunfire may attract unwanted attention, so you need to be careful. A morale system has been incorporated, meaning that after losses are sustained, performance will adversely be affected. The Frontline acquired a generally positive reception by reviewers. A Eurogamer reviewer felt the game was realistic, had detailed graphics and a very good interface that allowed complex actions. However, an IGN Entertainment review felt the sounds were nothing remarkable, and both the cutscenes in tutorial mode were unoriginal and standard. And finally, another review at GameSpot felt the ideas behind the game were good, but the implementation was a little bit flawed. So, there you go, that was World War II Frontline Command. Now, Mike Montgomery continued the role of managing director until the company for all intents and purposes closed in 2004. Mike says it was difficult to find any new deals for original IP around this time, so he didn't have much choice. Now, also in 2004, Mike Montgomery and John Phillips, the former technical director of Bitmap Brothers, went on to found Tower Studios, along with Sensible Soccer founder John Hare, and stated their involvement with the Bitmap Brothers ended in 2004. John Hare and Mike have certainly been friends from way back as far as Sensible Soccer, which Renegade published. Now, Tower Studios was to make mobile games before smartphones took over the market. They did reasonably well for 2 years, then interest in mobile development nosedived, and there was simply not enough money for the three of them, so John Phillips and Mike both decided to move on. John here has since taken over the reins and continues to maintain ties with Montgomery. So John now looks after some of the Bitmap titles for Mike. He finds developers and publishers he approves of, and then manages all the design and contracts, and work to bring the games to market. There's clearly a strong relationship, as well as a lot of respect between these two giants of British games design. At this point, Montgomery now has sole control of the Bitmap Brothers brand and its associated IP, but the company only exists now in name only. So the legacy and spirit of the Bitmap Brothers continues to live on, and for the next section of this video we're going to look at all the games that were released that continues the story of the Bitmap Brothers. So the first game we're going to look at is Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe, which is a re-release, and it was released in 2007. Empire Interactive released Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe onto Xbox Live Arcade on October the 17th, 2007. The game features a 3D graphics mode in addition to the classic visuals, as well as additional teams and online play. According to statements by the Bitmap Brothers, this version of the game takes place in the 24th century. It was eventually delisted from Xbox Live Arcade, but people who have already downloaded it can still be able to play it. After years of silence, a news post on the Bitmap Brothers official website announced Speedball 2 Tournament. And Speedball 2 Tournament was released onto Steam in November 2007 by Rockstar Interactive, but it did fail to achieve the success of the previous titles in the franchise. In February 2011, Tower Studios released another updated version called Speedball 2 Evolution, and this was developed by Vivid Games for the mobile phones. The game features multiplayer support and achievements via Game Center, and it was also released for the PlayStation Portable and the PlayStation 3. An enhanced port of Speedball 2 Evolution, titled Speedball 2 HD, was released November the 5th, 2013 on Steam. This game was also developed by Vivid Games, and this PC port was directed by John Hare. And, as its name suggests, the game features support for high definition. A remastered version of the game, the Chaos Engine, essentially a widescreen port of the Amiga AGA version, with the original intro and music intact, was developed by Abstraction Games and released for Windows, Mac and Linux on August 29th, 2013. The game retains all gameplay features, the audio and the graphics of the original. The remastered version adds the option to play a remote two-player game through Steam. And there's also a global high score list and two optional graphics effects, a softening filter to elevate the low resolution pixelated graphics, and a bloom effect on selected parts of the game graphics. Capcom Limited released Z Steel Soldiers for the Android in 2014 and the iPhone in 2015.
You got it. I'm on my way. Understood.
A remastered version of the game, Gods Remastered, was developed by Robot Riot Games and released on the 4th of December 2018 for Microsoft Windows. It was then announced for the Xbox and Steam and released December 2019, followed by the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4, with 29th of March 2020 given as the release date for the latter platforms. And then licensing restrictions prevented the distribution of this remastered edition past the 27th of March 2022. And then when it came to 2019, Rebellion Developments acquired the Bitmap Brothers back catalogue.
To Hades.
Then in 2021, Evercade released the Bitmap Brothers Collection 1. And this cartridge brings classic games such as Chaos Engine, Xenon 2 Mega Blast, Speedball, and a couple of more. And then in 2024, Evercade released the Bitmap Brothers Collection 2. And this includes Cadaver and its expansion, the Payoff, Gods, Magic Pockets and the Chaos Engine 2, plus the 32-bit home console version of the real strategy classic, Z. So there you go, that was my video covering the history of the Bitmap Brothers. Will the Bitmap Brothers ever rise up from the ashes again, as an indie developer perhaps, of quality games? It would certainly be great to see Xenon 3 or the Chaos Engine 3, but I'm a little bit sceptical, but it would be nice. Or perhaps something totally different. It would be great if the original three co-founders reunited, but one can only dream. So thank you very much for watching my video, it was very much appreciated. Now please leave a comment on your thoughts on the Bitmap Brothers and all of their games. If you've played any of them, please let me know. Now please don't forget to like my video, and it would be even better if you would subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That would just be great. So until my next video, take care of yourself and I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye. So much nostalgia.